Hi everyone, and welcome to Joe Reviews. Today I'll be reviewing the Nest Wired Doorbell Gen 2. I've been using Nest's first gen model for about a year, and it's been a great smart doorbell. I decided to upgrade and go over what this new doorbell brings to the table. Upon opening the box, the doorbell is sitting right at the top, similar to how my Ecobee thermostat was packaged and most tech these days. Underneath the doorbell are the instructions for how to get started and a list of what's included. Then there's two mounting plates, of which you'll choose whether to use the flat one or the 20-degree wedge. There's also the chime connector, cable connector, spacers, and screws. So right away you'll notice the Gen 2 model got an update to its build. It has a much flatter design which gives it a more modern look. I'm really a fan of this new design. I think it looks great, and this is probably the better looking video doorbells available. It still has the same status light in the front that shows that the doorbell is recording. Also, it still has a glowing ring around the doorbell button when it senses motion. It comes in 4 colors. I went with the ash color, which is basically a dark gray. The other options include snow, linen, and ivy. I think the other colors look great, and this is probably one of the very few doorbells available in so many colors. As you can see, the new Nest doorbell is larger than the old one. It's roughly a ½ inch longer, and despite the appearance, it's just a little thicker. When looking at the tech specs of Gen 1 versus Gen 2, it appears that the newer doorbell has a lower resolution at 960 versus 1200 for the Gen 1 model. I think the Gen 2 looks better, but it's not a big leap. What I did notice a difference in is the field of view. The Gen 2 doorbell has a 3:4 aspect ratio versus the 4:3 for Gen 1. Essentially, Gen 2 has a narrower but taller field of view when compared with the first gen model. I'm personally a fan of this change. On the old model, when a visitor was right next to the door, their face would sometimes be out of the frame. Usually I'd still be able to see who it was anyways when they were walking toward the door, but I think it's more useful to have a camera with a taller field of view. The setup in theory is relatively simple. I ran into an issue which made the install process a little longer. First, I turned off the power to the doorbell. After that, I went to the doorbell chime box and took out the old chime connector. Then I installed the new one. Since the new chime connector doesn't have the additional wire connectors, you have to install the wires back to the terminals. I just followed the diagram in my chime box to figure where the wires needed to go. Once I had that figured out, I removed my old Nest doorbell. The first gen model just pops off the base plate. I detached the wires and then took out the screws holding the base plate to the wall. I initially installed the new flat base plate for the second gen model. However, as I'll cover later, with a change in aspect ratio, I would have to change out the base plate. The instructions say to keep at least 1 inch of free space above the doorbell so you can lock it in place. This is something different than the first gen model, as that one just clipped right in. The Gen 2 model has an included Allen wrench to tighten a screw at the top of the doorbell to the base. The screw holes in the new plate lined up with where the previous holes were drilled, so I just reinstalled in the same place. With the original Nest doorbell, the wires connected directly to the doorbell. For the second gen doorbell, you connect the wires to the wire connector that's provided. You can still connect the wires directly to the doorbell. Google just suggests using the included wire connector for a better connection. The next step is to feed the wires back through the wall. However, with my setup, I just had the wires tucked behind the old doorbell. The way the wires feed through my wall, it's not possible to just push the wires back through the wall. Plus, with this new wire connector, there's no room to just tuck the wires behind the doorbell. The doorbell and the plate all sit flush with the wall. I ended up cutting out a bit more of my wall to tuck the wires behind the doorbell. Once I had the chime connector connected and the doorbell installed, I turned the power back on and finished the install process through the app. This part was by far the easiest step in the install process. I checked for the blue light on the doorbell, which meant it was ready for setup. Then I connected the doorbell to my home's Wi-Fi and listed where this doorbell was located. At this point, the camera is working. I went through a couple more settings with the audio, then testing the door chime and picking my preferred language. After that, I realized how much of a difference the aspect ratio made. With a narrower field of view, the camera wasn't capturing as much as I wanted in front of my door. I decided to install the 20-degree wedge plate. This made a big difference and provided a better viewing angle to see who's at my door. After the viewing angle was set to where I wanted it, I set up an event zone. You determine what your camera will record in this zone, such as people, packages, animals, vehicles, and motion. You can also decide whether you want a notification for each of these categories. I chose to have it record all the categories, but only notify me when it detects people and packages. You can change the shape of the zone to as large or as small as you want it. Maybe you want notifications when someone is coming toward your house, but you don't want one every time someone walks by on the sidewalk. You just set up the zone so it covers your yard and nothing further out than that. I also opted for the higher resolution. Google says when you choose a resolution, your camera will automatically adjust video resolution and compression based on bandwidth available. As you can see, my Nest doorbell over the first couple weeks of ownership has gone through 13.1 gigs of data. The majority of that was uploaded versus downloaded. This chart shows what you should expect for data usage based on the video quality you choose. There's a difference in data used depending on if you have the higher subscription tier to Nest Aware, which gives you 24/7 video recording for 10 days. As I have the lower subscription tier, I have event-based recording, This means the doorbell only records when something triggers an event, such as a person, motion, or an animal. According to the chart, I should expect to go through about 75 gigs of data in a month. So far for this month, I'm on track to only go through roughly a third of that. If you have data caps to your internet provider, it's probably best to choose high video quality versus max. I try to enable familiar faces as it's a feature they advertise. With this feature enabled, you'll get a notification of who is arriving at your house. In order to enable this, you need their subscription, Nest Aware. I contacted support as I was having trouble enabling the familiar faces feature. I came to find out that the reason I was having trouble turning it on was due to laws in my area. Due to this, Google doesn't enable face detection where I live. It's not a deal breaker for me, but I feel that since they advertise this feature for Nest Aware, there should be some kind of discount on the subscription for people who can't access all features due to legislation in the areas they live. There's also an option for your doorbell chime. Now this will be the sound that your doorbell makes. This is not the chime box inside your house, which means your visitors will hear this when they ring your doorbell outside. Essentially, it's like choosing a ringtone for your phone. During the holidays, they have some festive ones. It's kind of a fun feature to have. I typically just leave it at default, but I've changed it for a few weeks during the holidays. One of the biggest complaints with this doorbell is that it's not compatible with the Nest app, which a lot of people liked. Instead, you have to use the Google Home app to control it. To be honest, I don't think there's much of a difference going from the Nest app to Google Home. The Google Home app was recently updated and offers a clean look. I like that when I open the app, both my cameras are showing right away. I'm also a fan of the 2-second preview of the clips, which wasn't available on the Nest app. It just allows for a quick preview of what was recorded. Lastly, the audio. It sounds about average for a doorbell camera, not great by any means, but it's clear enough to where you can understand what someone is saying. You have the choice to change the camera volume or turn the mic off or on. My biggest complaint with this doorbell is that despite the change in aspect ratio, a person's face will still not be completely visible when at the door. Nest suggests to mount this doorbell at about 48 inches. Mine is at 47 inches, which I think wouldn't make that big of a difference, but it still doesn't allow me to view a person's whole face when they're at the door. Also, the video quality is decent, as was the case with the first gen model. Video doorbells from Arlo and Ring both offer higher resolution that Nest just doesn't match from a specs on paper viewpoint. It's interesting to note that DxOMark, which is known for assessing quality of imaging, displays, audio, and other specs of consumer electronics, has stated that the Nest Wire Gen 2 has the best image quality of smart doorbells they've tested. It looks like while the specs might tell one story, real-world use tells another, with Nest coming out on top in terms of image quality. In the end, I am happy with the Nest Gen 2 doorbell. Aesthetically, it's a great design, very sleek and modern looking, which I'm always a fan of. The taller field of view is a plus compared to the older model's wider field of view. Other than the looks and change in aspect ratio, not much has changed from Gen 1 to Gen 2. If you're someone who has the first gen Nest model, I don't think there's enough change to warrant an upgrade, unless you want the upgraded design or want to control your smart doorbell from the Google Home app versus the Nest app. If you don't have a smart doorbell yet and are in the market for one, then I'd recommend this model. The Nest Wire Doorbell Gen 2 provides a good balance of features and price. And that's it for my review of the Nest Gen 2 doorbell. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next review. Take care.